Good evening. I'll call this meeting of the Cartersville City Council to order. If you'll please stand for our invocation and pledge.
Let us pray. Holy God, source of all good gifts, as we gather, we are aware that we are richly blessed, especially in this community. Attune our hearts, minds, and wills to be faithful leaders. Guide us in the work we do this night, that we give glory and praise to your name. Amen.
Amen. Join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Keeling, the roll, please.
Carrie Hodge, Ward 1. Here. Jay Stepp, Ward 2.
Here.
Louis Tonsmeyer, Ward 3.
Here.
Lindsay McDaniel, Ward 4.
Here.
Diane Tate, Ward 5.
Here.
Lori Pruitt, Ward 6.
Hail, hail, the gang's all here. Thank you, Connie. Our first order of business is actually to go over a rule that if you are here for the beginning of the meeting, you must stay for the entire duration of it. Our first order of business is the approval of our council meeting minutes from our November 5th meeting. And council, you've had these well in advance of tonight, and so if there are any edits or corrections or additions, now's the time to get those into the record. If not, a motion for approval would be in order.
Make a motion to approve, Mayor.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And the minutes are approved. We have a series of public hearings relative to first readings. And the first case is Z15-04. Mr. Menino, if you will get us started with that, please, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As with all the zoning cases on the agenda this evening, they all have been properly posted and advertised, and there appears to be no conflicts of interest. This particular case, as with all the other cases, have been evaluated based on the standards for exercise of zoning powers. This application is by TPA Group. The property is located at 118 Old Mill Road, east of the intersection with South Irwin Street. It's for approximately 63.5 acres out of a 152 or so acre tract. The portion being rezoned of the tract is the upper portion. The remaining 80 acres consists of some houses and barns and some other things consistent with a horse farm. The request had a very large square footage. Because of that, it met the thresholds for requiring it to proceed through the state's Development of Regional Impact Review process. With that, the Northwest Georgia Regional Commission did review the application and did return a favorable recommendation. Noted the project was consistent, but it also encouraged the review and implementation of comments and guidelines that they presented in their report. That report should have been included in your application also, or in your analysis also. Additionally, I believe the initial application was from R20 single family residential to HI heavy industrial with conditions. It was also reviewed by the individual departments of the city that review zoning cases. The only comments that we received back were from the Public Works Department, and it was based on the applicant's traffic study. There were some concerns about a certain intersection of South Bridge and Highway 41 going below the acceptable levels of service. The Planning Commission did hold a hearing on this application and has recommended approval of the application at their November 10th meeting as requested as conditioned and presented by the applicant. However, since that time and before the start of this public hearing, the applicant did state to me that they were willing to reduce the request to the lower industrial district of light industrial as opposed to heavy industrial. Our zoning ordinance does allow for mayor and council to reduce a zoning request per ordinance to a lower category. And again, before this hearing started, the applicant did state to me they were looking to reduce it to a light industrial as opposed to heavy industrial.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from Mr. Menino at this point?
Randy, what was the recommendation from the planning department?
Initially, the planning department was concerned with the heavy industrial district. There were conflicting factors and some inconsistencies in the analysis. And our first consideration was light industrial, feeling it was a more appropriate zoning than the HI, but there were still some other concerns, possible traffic impacts and so forth.
Any other questions for Mr. Menino at this point? Thank you, Randy. And I'm going to open up a public hearing relative to file Z1504. And what I will do, for those of you that are kind of new to this process or new to City Council, we're going to give 10 minutes per side to discuss. Now, that being said, as long as we are plowing new ground, as long as we are getting more information, I think the purpose here tonight is to make sure that council gets to hear as much relevant and new information so that they can make an informed decision at our meeting next month. So, with that being said, I'm going to ask Mr. Lovell to keep track of time for both sides. And when you step forward to speak, if you will please state your name and your address for our clerk. So, that being said, I'll open up the public hearing relative to Z1504. Anybody wishing to step forward, speak for or against, may do so at this time.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Jeff Watkins here on behalf of the applicant, 128 West Cherokee Avenue, Cartersville, Georgia. With me tonight is the representative from TPA Group, the applicant, my client, Wayne Isaac, and also Mr. Billy Wright, who is the owner of Old Mill Farm, as well as the subject property that's part of the rezoning application. I did want to start, before I got into the actual applicant, as well as talking about the property and the subject property, I wanted to reiterate what we've agreed to do tonight. We have agreed to reduce the zoning to light industrial. I have had numerous meetings with a lot of the residents of the Waterford. I've had several phone conversations. I've been working now for several months and trying to accommodate the Waterford residents, and I have talked to my client at length and sent the last hearing all the issues that came up, all the concerns that came up. My client, which I think is saying a lot, they agreed to reduce the zoning to light industrial. And the reason I think that's very important is my client, TPA Group, is heavily involved in recruiting industrial users to the state of Georgia and the Southeast. They work hand in hand with the Department of Economic Development for the state. And if anyone that's involved in economic development understands the process, the state has given a list of criteria for potential users that are looking at Georgia to locate an industrial project. That list of criteria is given to the particular industrial developers, TPA Group, my client being one of them. They try to match a piece of property to it. It was a consensus amongst TPA Group at the beginning of this process that this needed to be heavy industrial, and if it wasn't heavy industrial, it would at least be heavy industrial with conditions because of the attractions of what users would want, even though there's a high chance that it would be a light industrial use. A lot of industrial users nationwide as well as internationally are just caught up in that heavy industrial versus light industrial. But in spite of all of that, even though I contend that it might cost some Class A users for the city, in spite of all that, they've agreed to reduce it to light industrial, and I hope at least for some that's in opposition, that makes a difference. And that's what we're trying to do. But talking about my client, TPA Group, if you are in the know regarding economic development in the state of Georgia, ask anyone, commercial brokers, industrial developers, those within the Department of Economic Development, they will tell you that TPA Group is one of the best, if not the best, at recruiting industrial users to the state, as well as developing industrial Class A sites. We're not talking about a mom and pop industrial building of 100,000 square feet. We're talking about Amazon, users like that, big time users that the city would be proud to have to increase the tax base and lower our overall utility charges. And that's what they do. And that's my client. In regards to the property, if you want to look at this, I tried to enlarge this, but we weren't able to do it. But this is the site right here. Like Randy said, it's approximately 60 acres. It is 60 acres of the overall 180 acres of Old Mill Farm, which is that. If you look at the surrounding properties, you have this site right here, that site right there, which is chemical products. That's a heavy industrial use. Smokestack, they've been there for years and years and years. Right here, combine all those buildings, that's a major industrial, heavy industrial site. It's the former site of Glad, and that is heavy industrial. On the west side of the subject property, you have all of this, which is heavy industrial uses, but it is a light industrial zoning district. But again, all these users are heavy manufacturers that have been grandfathered in. If you go on over here, and we have another slide that we can turn to later that shows there's 3 other industrial users, manufacturers that border the Waterford also on that side. So I think from a reasonable standpoint, this is a major industrial area of the city of Cartersville, and it surrounds this property. But most compelling, I think you will agree, is that this property right here that abuts the subject property, not only was that annexed by the city of Cartersville in 2009, but it was rezoned to heavy industrial without conditions. So what you've got here is you've got the property owner of Old Mill Farm being surrounded by heavy industrial property or users, and they've also got a piece of property here that's going to inevitably be developed as a heavy industrial site with no conditions. There's going to be a lot of folks, I'm sure, coming up here in opposition. They're going to say, you know, look at the impact, look at us, look at our investment. What I would ask that y'all to do is take a minute, think about the property owner. Mr. Wright's 3 generations of family that have owned Old Mill Farm. In fact, I think Mr. Wright's grandmother, Miss Weinman, had conveyed some of the property where some of the heavy industrial users are. Someone told me within the city, I have never verified this, that there was even conditions placed in the transfer documents to say it needed to be industrial. That family understood the importance of industrial use, industrial development. Philanthropically, we have Wyman Mineral Museum because of that. We have the stadium, Wyman Football Stadium at the high school. All that is the history of this property. I would ask that you consider that. I would ask that you consider this and at the next hearing approve it for what we're asking for zoning-wise. It is the highest and best use. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I reserve any further time I have for rebuttal.
Any questions for Mr. Watkins?
I do have one, if you don't mind.
Sure.
On the map site here that we cannot see, where you said there was already industrial use that is along the Waterford property line? Is
Yes.
that where Southern Yarn?
That is the old Lacey Mill. There's 3 businesses there that are industrial users, and it all borders Pembroke Street. Admittedly, some of those are lots the houses have not been built on, but there are a couple of houses that are there that border, I believe, border that property. I have a that's Pembroke up there, and that's the 3 users. All that is right. I'd say less than 100 feet from the residential property lines there.
So they have a 100-foot buffer?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Jeff, I was wondering, what, in your opinion, made this have to go to a DRI? Was it the square feet of the building? Was it the traffic?
Square feet and heavy industrial. But I would point out that DRI came back recommending that it was, okay.
Do you know what the cutoff is? And this is 1 million square feet?
500,000.
500,000 is
If there's a residential house, there have to be 100 feet
Okay.
before they could build.
Other questions for Mr. Watkins?
Parking, no, landscape.
That's it. That's the, Brandon, that's what I just handed
Buffers
Ms.
and
Hodge.
setbacks are somewhat different.
And that shows,
The buffer is a undisturbed area.
Let's see if I can go on down. There you go, right there. That is Pembroke. That's part of the Waterford. Those are the three sites. I think that's the Lacey Mills, the rug manufacturer, I believe.
Southern Yarn Dyers.
Yeah.
Southern Yarn, yeah.
Southern Yarn now, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. Again, we have a public hearing for Z 15-04. And again, anybody wishing to step forward, speak for or against, may do so at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I did want to state for the record that Mr. Watkins has 3 minutes and 30 seconds left.
Thank you.
Good evening. I am Brandon Bowen. My office is about half a block that way. I think it's that way. I always get turned around when I come into this building. That way. Well, okay. South Public Square. And I live at 17 River Shoals Drive, which is in the city on the south side. I am here tonight representing a number of folks that live in the Waterford subdivision, not the Waterford HOA. I don't represent the entirety of the neighborhood. I represent folks that live along the road that is nearest to this property. And maybe the easiest way, Mr. Mayor, with your approval, I might just ask my folks to stand up so that everybody knows. If you're here with me, please stand up. See some hands out there.
Okay, thank you.
I want to make just a few points here. I know that your time is valuable and limited. And also, I submitted a letter earlier, which I know that you guys have had an opportunity to read. I want to talk about a few things. One, this rezoning would be diametrically opposed to what your comprehensive planning shows. Comprehensive plan for this area, as you know, and as noted in Mr. Menino's report, shows R20, or actually, excuse me, shows suburban living, which would include R20, R15, and the planned development type uses. To go to heavy industrial or light industrial would be a dramatic change from that planning. And planning is important because down the road, if you make other decisions that are not consistent with your plan, or excuse me, that are consistent with your plan, a pattern and a history of consistent rezoning decisions supports those decisions. So not only does the fact that it is currently that this application is inconsistent with the plan, not only does that indicate that this should be denied, but it would undermine your future decisions if you make decisions tonight or on this application that are not consistent with your planning process. That's an important consideration, and one that comes up in virtually every zoning lawsuit. I want to address briefly the traffic study.
Sure.
This issue came up at the work session, I know, but this is, I don't have Mr. Watkins' technological skill, but this is a Google shot of the area. This here, of course, is the Waterford area. This is the subject property. These are the roads in the area. I've got noted on here CPS, CES, and Excel. CPS primary school. My children are both proud graduates of the Cartersville Primary School. CES, Cartersville Elementary School. The study does not address this intersection, and I think that's a huge flaw, and I think anyone who lives in the city knows that, because traffic here at Etowah and Old Mill Road is terrible in the morning, because everybody has to get through to the primary school and the elementary school, which are right beside here, and itself, of course, is across the street. Now, in the traffic study, they say well, only 5% of the traffic is going to go that way. That's an assumption, and there's no justification for that assumption, and that is an important assumption. Anybody who's going to Alabama or Rome or Cedartown or Rockmart, Dallas, is likely going to use this route. This is the main route to and from the west. So to assume that none of this truck traffic is going to use this route is unjustifiable. As it is, the police department has to put police officers out there every single morning of the school year to get traffic to work. What's it going to do if now we also have truck traffic coming through there, additional truck traffic beyond what's there already? I ask that you consider that and take a serious look at that question. I think it's a real issue. Now, came here tonight with the understanding that the proposed condition on this rezoning application would be that even though it would be rezoned heavy industrial, that it would be light industrial uses conditioned that would be allowed and special uses in the light industrial district. As I understand from what Mr. Watkins is saying, that condition is no longer being asked for, and they are simply asking for light industrial, and that if they wanted a special use in this district, they would have to come back and get a special use application. And I just want to make sure that I understood that correctly.
That's correct.
Okay, that's good to hear. I think that helps. I think that was a big issue. I still think you need to consider whether or not it makes sense to do a rezoning that is not site plan specific. Commonly, throughout Georgia, if local governments are going to rezone, particularly to heavy industrial or light industrial, any kind of intensive use, it's going to be site plan specific. If you go to Marietta, if you go to Canton, if you go to Rome, every single rezoning you see, it will be site plan specific if it's going to a heavy use. And in fact, that's been Cartersville's practice long too. I live at River Shoals. When it was rezoned about 10 years back for that development, it was rezoned site plan specific with a list of conditions such as 25% green space, a wide buffer to the river, things of that nature. That's how it's done in modern planning. To give someone a free pass on allows any kind of light industrial use without it being site plan specific is not protective of the city. And I think that's something you definitely need to consider. I would briefly address the property to the east of the subject that Mr. Watkins pointed out, that was zoned in heavy industrial with no conditions. That property was already zoned industrial in the county. And in fact, it was shown as industrial on the county's future land use map. And I have these documents. I'll submit those for the record so that you have them. But so when the city annexed and placed the heavy industrial zoning on that, it wasn't changing anything. It was putting on what the county already had on those properties. And importantly, Chemical Products already has a building on that property and had it on there prior to the annexation. So that was not a change. This is a wholly different matter. This is allowing a totally new use that you don't know what it's going to be or what it's going to look like yet if it's not site plan specific. I would ask you to recommend to the TPA group, get your buyer, find out who you're going to put there, and then bring your rezoning request, and let's make it site plan specific so we know what we're going to have, and you can do the job of making sure that any things that need to be done to mitigate any downsides to this particular use are addressed at that time in the site plan. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have, but I appreciate your time. I know this is a contentious matter, but appreciate your time.
Any questions for Mr. Bowen at this time? I do have one question. Do you feel that R20 and R15 would be less impactful than the proposed zoning?
Absolutely.
Okay.
R20, R15 are similar to what is there in the Waterford now.
I'm saying relative to traffic. If you had, I don't know how many homes that would be out there, but if you had, say, another 180 homes out there, the impact of traffic that would be traveling Old Mill Road.
Well, certainly there'd be a lot more cars there than there are now. That's a valid point. I don't think you'd see a lot of tractor trailers, though, from those houses.
I would hope not. Any other questions at this time?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Opponents have 2 minutes and 52 seconds left.
Thank you. And again, public hearing Z15-04. Again, please state your name and your address for our clerk, please.
Mary Hoganson, 7 Bedford Court. I just want to bring up a point that hasn't been brought up. Under light industrial, it's my understanding that you can have, at the property line, 70 decibels sound level. That equates to a very noisy level, according to EPA, even above noisy urban. And you can see from the slide, there is no attenuation between the backside of that property and the residents there in the new section of the Waterford. The yarn place you were talking about, you can see it's all wooded, so you would have attenuation there. So also would like to bring up that even though the light industrial allows a 70 decimal, the Federal Highway Administration's national rules for residential for a new road to be made sets that at 67 decimals. And the Georgia DOT indicates anything above a 66 would be an impact to the industrial, to the residential area, and will require abatement. So I'd like to, I could leave this paper with you. This shows.
If you would give that to the clerk, that'd be fantastic, and she can get that information out. So I do have a question for Mr. Menino, who's, where is it? Oh, you're over there, thank you. I'm just trying to get verification on the 70 decibel and a light industrial, is that?
With a special use permit, they can't exceed 70 decibels if they go into those standards like we set for Americo in that process when that was set under those guidelines.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to get.
Randy, will you entertain me for a second? What would make the noise of 70 decibels? I mean, what are you talking about?
I am not a noise expert, but I don't know. A honking horn could probably make 70 decibels. So,
Like one of my questions would be like what do they call them, forklifts, and the beeping of it backing up. I mean, is
yeah,
that,
you have tractor trailers backing have alarm systems built in where they have a continuous beep. Again, I don't know what that decibel level is.
Okay, thank you. I just want to get, and Ms. Hoganson, it wasn't that I didn't believe you, I was just trying to make sure that we're getting all the right information, so I appreciate that. You had the ordinance piece pulled out right there, and you knew it better than I did, so I appreciate that. And we'll continue on with the public hearing. That's... Reporters get kind
I'm
of
not all that
territorial.
technologically challenged myself, I guess.
Mayor, before he starts, 70 decibels is defined as loud, average radio, normal street noise on the decibel chart.
Okay, thank you.
what's 66?
66?
The radio turned
The
down.
next one is 60, which is conversational speech.
Let's be on the same page.
Yes.
My name is Ted Boone. I live at 40 Galway Drive in the Waterford. I'd like to start by thanking you, the members of the City Council, for all the work you do making Cartersville a great place to live, to work, and to raise a family. Secondly, I'd like to thank Billy Wright, who for the past 10 years has been as agreeable a neighbor as anybody could hope for. There's a saying in the business that goes something like this: in God we trust, all others bring data. It's in that light I'd like to address the question, does Cartersville really need this property in this location for industry? If you look at the Cartersville zoning map and you cross-reference it with some aerial photos and some mapping tools, you'll observe that there are more than 900 acres of undeveloped heavy industrial zones in the city today, and those are not adjacent to one of the city's primary neighborhoods. In fact, you'll notice that more than 500 of those acres are available altogether in an industrial park near the interstate, out by Anheuser-Busch. You'll probably also notice from the maps that there are nearly 100 undeveloped mixed-use acres less than 2 miles east, with much better access to the interstate, and at a location that wouldn't need to route 6 miles of tractor trailers a day through Cartersville streets. But to really understand the situation, you need to get a little closer look. So you leave the maps and you get in your car and you drive around the proposed property. The first thing you'll notice are all the signs, big ones, half a dozen at least, sitting in front of many of the warehouses saying for sale or for lease. It turns out those signs advertise more than 750,000 square feet available within a half mile of the proposed property today. And you see that those nearby warehouses are only about half occupied. And with just a tad more research, you uncover that these nearby vacant warehouses are designated by the city and the state as a tax incentive opportunity zone to encourage their redevelopment. And you wonder, wouldn't the city literally be working against itself and its redevelopment goals to zone more industrial space right across the street, while existing space remains so vacant? If anything, you conclude the city needs less industrial space, not more. Living in Richmond, Virginia about 11 years ago and near our wits' end with 2 toddler boys, my lovely wife said to me, "If you want another child, we'll have to live within 20 minutes of my mother." God bless her. And thus we moved our home to Cartersville, and it turns out we were blessed with a fireball of a baby girl. And since that time, I swear, the kids have grown a collective 12 feet. We purchased our home in a tranquil neighborhood, trusting that the community and its leaders would protect their neighborhoods and stick to their plan and honor our commitment to raise our family away from the noise and the pollution of the big city. And to this point, I must say, our community has delivered. But by approving the needless rezoning, the city would betray our family and betray our neighbors and betray our neighborhood just to gamble that someday they might realize some industrial tax revenue from this venture. And that gamble could end up transforming our nice, peaceful neighborhood by adding noise and pollution and traffic and turning it into someplace where nobody would really want to live. So please don't gamble away the trust. Don't gamble away the quality of life of your residents and vote this rezoning down. Thank you.
Mayor, I did want to inform you we're at 13 minutes of speaking.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Terry Howard, and I live at 387 Martin Road, Cartersville, and I'm the owner of Irwin Chase Townhouse Apartments located on 575 South Irwin Street. Okay. According to the information I have received, approximately 500 trucks is estimated to travel South Bridge Drive per day. There's approximately three trucks per minute. Okay. We have 58 townhomes located directly on the frontage of South Irwin Street. These trucks will have a noise impact on our residents and our business 24 hours a day. I would like the City Council and this company to consider using the posted truck route, State Highway 293, if this zoning passes. Trucks heading south towards Emerson could easily connect on Red Top Mountain Road and Old Alabama Road before entering Emerson. Trucks needing to go north would lose very little time, if any, by going this way, taking into consideration the now 5 red lights going up through South Ridge and 41. Before you get to the interstate, there's 5 red lights. So I think in consideration of the red lights, I don't believe they'd lose any time. But going to Red Top and Old Alabama Road route, there's no red lights and only 3 or 4 homes. And it's with very little traffic all the way to I-75. If zoning is approved, I would like to see this truck route as a condition which would relieve noise and traffic impacting our townhomes and our business. We have been on Irwin Street for over 15 years, and I'm very concerned with the noise impact that this will have for our business, along with the traffic impact on South Irwin Street. Okay.
Thank you.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. You just cut in front of somebody, but go ahead.
It's all right.
And I know that we're over our time. I'm Scott Painter, on Tanglewood Drive, and I have a small business about 2 blocks from here. And I'm going to try to be in the middle of the road, not for and not against. It appears to me that decisions are going to have to be made on traffic alone, or can be made on traffic alone, and the quality of life that brings or takes away. If you have R20 there, you've got a lot of cars, a lot of issues with automobile traffic. But if you have light industrial and you're looking at 500 cars a day, you're also looking at, in my judgment, I'd like to see somebody equate cars to transfer trucks. large trucks over the road so that you can make a better decision. But I think you can make the decision based on traffic alone. Jobs and opportunities and things like that, that's part of it. But I think quality of life issue with traffic and the safety issues there should be your number one goal, number one thing to think about. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll keep it brief. My name's Troy Weaver. I live at 38 Westchester Drive in the Waterford. I'm here to represent the Waterford Homeowners Association Board. I am the president of the board and have been the board president for the last 5 or 6 years. The board is very concerned, and the board feels like that this rezoning would hurt the Waterford. We have 409 homes in the Waterford. That's 409 taxpayers, property tax. We also have another 21 lots that are still unsold. We want to make sure that we fill out our subdivision with those lots. So we have a lot of concerned residents. And in fact, I'd like the residents to stand that are here tonight from the Waterford. And you can see that we're well supported. And we've done our homework, and that's why these other gentlemen have talked. But we are against the rezoning. We just think that it is not a community and our subdivision's best interest. Thank you.
Thank you. What are we doing on time, Mr. Lovell?
So far, they've spoken for 17 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay. Anybody else wish to get up and speak relative to Z1504, for or against? Please step forward.
Hello, my name is Janet Waldy, and I live at 436 Waterford Drive. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things. One, last week it was pointed out because of the section to the right of the property that we're discussing is zoned HI, was a reason why. And then today it was pointed out that the rest of the property around it is all HI, that it only stands to reason that this should be rezoned. But last week, when we brought up the fact that rezoning that could also mean in the future rezoning the lower section where the owner lives, the property there, that at some point he may want to sell that, and that would have to be rezoned. We were told, well, just because this is rezoned doesn't mean we would automatically rezone that. Yet today, that was another reason why this piece of property should be rezoned. I hope I didn't confuse you, but we're saying one thing and then we're saying another for the benefit of selling this property and rezoning it. I'm curious if those who stand to profit from this, other than the owner, live in the Waterford or the surrounding neighborhoods that would be affected. And I don't mean to be rude, but for those of us that do, we seriously think about that. We don't stand to profit from this. We stand a huge, huge loss. And my husband and I lived here years ago, and about 12 years ago, in the Waterford, and he lived in the Waterford. We weren't married at the time. We were dating, and I lived out, but in the Cartersville area. And we moved away, and we decided when we retired, where do we want to move? And I wanted to come back to Cartersville so badly because I love it here. And I love the beauty of it, and I love the citizens, and I love what's done here. And so may I point on the map where we moved to?
Sure.
We're approximately right here. And sometimes when you look on the map, that looks like, oh, that's so far away. It is not far away at all. We can see the property, which is, to us, absolutely beautiful. And I know that maybe it needs to be sold. I understand there may be a situation or whatnot. And I am super sympathetic to that. So much so that I even called the sign, the number on the sign, for sale sign, to see if maybe there was something that could be done. Maybe we could buy it. Maybe a group of us could get together and buy it and relieve the person who needed to sell it, and at the same time benefit every single person. And I'll have to say to you, when I made that phone call, the person that told me about the property wanted me quickly off the phone, said it was under contract, didn't take my name, number, didn't ask me if I might want to consider placing a bid on it if this fell through, didn't ask me if I wanted to see any other property. And I just feel like that should have been done. And as a property owner, if I had my home for sale or my property for sale, and especially if I really had to sell it, if my agent or I'm not saying it was the agent, but whoever answered the phone and was dealing with that, did not pursue the person calling in any way, I think you know where I'm going with this. If it were your property, you would be really upset as well. You would want that person to pursue whatever phone call came through. And we wanted to see if maybe there was something we could do. So what I'm trying to say is we're sympathetic, but at the same time, all of these people, and it's not just the Waterford, I feel really bad that we're just saying the Waterford. It's a lot of people in this area. We're asking you, please, please, don't let this go through. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
It's been 22 minutes, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Is there any rebuttal time or anything?
I'll just say one thing.
Please do.
My name is Richard Lewis. I'm from 1 Hastings Drive, and I run Shottenkirk Automotive Group here in North Georgia. We came to beautiful Cartersville, Georgia about 13 months ago, and I had a choice to live anywhere I want to. I left Panama City Beach to come to this beautiful town, and after spending time with your Chamber of Commerce and even having my quarrels with the HOA in Waterford with trying to make sure my home was a beautiful address and being part of this community, I will tell you the reason I chose it and the reason we have spent a lot of time in this community is paying way too much money for a piece of property to redesign our new Honda dealership for $11.5 million when I could have built it in Ackworth for about $4.5 million was the people and the great people that run this city. I moved here to make sure all three of my children have a great place. My daughter is going to school here because I want her to be involved in the community. And all I want to say is make sure you remember the residents are the people that everyone talks about in the Chamber of Commerce and making this a beautiful city and a place to live, not an industrial park. You guys have plenty of industrial space now. Keep Cartersville what it is, a great religious community where people can raise their family, and that's what the Waterford stands for. That's all I want to say to you guys.
Anyone else relative to Z1504? And remember, we're any new information relative to this case? For or against? May step forward now.
Trying to hurry up so I don't have time to get microphone, Matt. All right, I'll try to keep it brief, but I did want to respond. There was a lot said, and I'm going to try to keep my thoughts straight. First of all, in regards to the argument about the future land use map, I'd like to take you back years to 1990, the future land use map for this property, of which everything but the recent rezoning to heavy industrial without conditions was here. The future land use map said industrial. Fast forward to 2002, the future land use map said industrial. For some reason, and I would argue arbitrary, because it wasn't really the city doing it in 2007, the city decided to hire a consultant, which a lot of people would argue sometimes that's not a good idea. But they hired a consultant, and after going through, I think, 2 or 3 different people looking at it, it was recommended to be suburban living. And that's why the map in 07 said suburban living. But regardless of all of that, and I think land use planners, our zoning administrator would concur, when you, as the city, annexed into the city and rezoned that property right next to it to heavy industrial without conditions, that's a change in condition. And if you had a future land use map done now, they're not going to say that 60 acres is suburban living, R20, R15. Something similar to the Waterford. You're not going to say that. So I would argue that regardless of what the future land use map says, it's not suburban living, it's industrial. Second, I think there was also an argument talking about the property, one of the Delaware subsidiary properties right next to chemical products has a structure on it, so therefore, you're just continuing the zoning because there's a building there, an industrial building. That's a lab. If Dellinger, in my opinion, had intended for that to stay there, that tiny little building as a lab, then they would put a property line right there and then they would rezone that. No, they rezoned this whole thing because they wanted to do one of two things, because I handled the zoning. They either wanted to increase chemical products over here, or they wanted to put a completely different user right there. But with all due respect to the opposition, I think it's absurd to argue that because the county did it, we just had to automatically go along with it as a city. That's not true. I've been turned down on zonings before where I've been in the county and tried to annex into a zoning. Second of all, I think Mr. Menino will inform you that when property comes into the city, it comes in as residential. It certainly doesn't come in as industrial. So the city had the opportunity, this council had the opportunity to deny that zoning. They didn't. They approved it unanimously. Unanimously. Heavy industrial without conditions. Then we're talking about the traffic. The traffic engineer that did this report is an independent person. His profession is to do traffic reports. I believe Mr. Sanders indicated at the Planning Commission that this particular traffic engineer has done traffic studies for the city. They hire this traffic engineer to do traffic studies. And I think a neutral reading of it will reveal that this traffic engineer bent over backwards trying to find a reason for impact, and he didn't find it. Now, we can say any truck traffic is impactful and therefore you should deny it. If that's the case, then we probably never would have rezoned the JDA part and wouldn't have rezoned Americo, because Americo that I handled, 4 years ago, has residential within 50 feet of the front entrance there. None of that would happen because it's got trucks, it's got traffic. But this particular engineer said there's 5% traffic going west, 5%. And of that 5%, 29%, between 9 and 29% are trucks. Well, that comes out to be about 20, using their high water mark, and there's no reasonable explanation that you would even use that. Maybe you'd split the difference, but for the sake of argument tonight, let's say it's 29%. That's 24 trucks a day that might go west. I argue that hardly any truck traffic will go west because this building's going to be potentially a $50 million investment. It's going to be a hub for the southeast, and I don't think you're going to have a ton of traffic going down Old Mill Road to go to Cedartown, Rockmart, or Dallas. The reason they want to be here, the reason you're going to market this through the Economic Development Department with the state of Georgia and get this type of Class A tenant is because we're close to Atlanta and we're close to the interstate, and you want to go where there are all the arterial routes, both north and south on the interstate. So I would argue it's no impact traffic, and even if it was, it's very little truck traffic. I also, one other thing I wanted to point out. When GLAD was operating, GLAD, which is right there, this whole development, when that was operating, they had 600 employees. And that was as of 2006, I think they closed down. So, the road can handle some traffic. If you just take the argument as truthful, which I contend is not reasonable, the whole area right there going up and down Old Mill can handle the traffic. There was also an argument that why are we having to put this here in what I would argue is an industrial park, but why would you put this 60 acres, this particular industrial use, why would you put it here? We've got a JDA park, why not put it there? The argument, the position on that is JDA Park was not formed and developed to concentrate all the industry, all the industrial uses in one area. That's shared by the city and the county. Now, we have areas in the city that are just industrial. Quite the opposite. It was used as a marketing tool because there's very little property for industrial users in the city of Cartersville. So it was used as a marketing tool. This is a very good area for industrial too. And again, we're not talking about the full 160 acres. We're talking about the 60 acres right there that front Old Mill and that has industrial surrounding it, of which it's all heavy industrial users are actually zoned heavy industrial. I think there was also an argument that, you know, this is close to the Waterford, therefore it's suburban living, therefore it ought to be a residential development. If you want to be reasonable, I just don't see anybody wanting to buy a house where that proposed building is in between all that heavy industrial. So the highest and best use is not residential. But if you want to take a look at the traffic, which, Mayor, you pointed out, I think Waterford has over 3,600 trips a day. We're talking about 24 trucks a day going west. How many cars would be going toward the school if that was a residential development? Not to mention the fact we're talking a $50 million investment, probably a $2 million gain on the tax base versus a loss for the Waterford subdivision. Most people in the know when it comes to taxes and tax base and what the city really has to use from those taxes that are paid. Residential subdivisions don't add a whole lot. They're users. Also, again, industrial industry, this type of use keeps our utility charges lower. There was also opposition stating that this is going to generate too much noise, and I think Mr. Menino clarified this, but under light industrial, any noise that's going to be produced outside the building, you'd have to get a special use permit. And that would entail you going back through the Planning Commission and 2 hearings before the council, and the council would be able to decide whether this particular use, if there was a lot of noise emanating from the building, would even be allowed. And again,
Mr. Mayor, did want to let you know it's been 15 minutes total for the proponents, and for it to be equal time, they would have 7 more minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I only have probably 2 minutes left, hopefully. I would also, in regards to the noise, I would also point out the proposed building would be over a quarter of a mile away to the nearest property line in the Waterford subdivision, and also if we could look back, I don't think we have it, you're fine, Randy. Over here on Pembroke, there are loading docks that are less than 100 feet from the nearest Waterford property lines. The purpose of me pointing all that out is there's a lot of noise. You've got heavy industrial users all around this. I would argue there's not any appreciable increase in the noise from something like this when you've got a ton of noise emanating from all those uses already, plus the building would be faced toward the other industrial uses on Irwin, which would dissipate the noise as well. Lastly, there was an argument that we have a ton of industrial space that's vacant. Why don't you go to that space? Why do you have to rezone this? Well, I think I can speak for my client and say if there was the same kind of space available, they would certainly rent it, because I think, as everybody knows, it's a whole lot cheaper to rent than it is to build and construct a brand new building. The problem is there are no available buildings that can accommodate modern industrial practices. It needs racking. That's why they were going to invest $50 plus million to do a kind of building like this, because there's just not any of it available anywhere else. The rest of the property, I would just state that Mr. Wright has informed residents in the Waterford, he's informed me, and I think he's informed some of y'all, that he intends this to stay a horse farm for the remaining property. But all we're trying to rezone is the 60 acres. We would argue that it's the highest and best use, and we would ask that you approve it. And I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you for your comments.
If I was to ask a traffic study question, do I address it to Jeff or to Tom?
I would address it to Jeff first, and if he's not able to answer that, then you could ask.
There's a good chance. Again, that's an engineer. I think they went to tech. I didn't go to tech.
Well, either way, I got a little bit of a lesson from Tommy earlier today on how traffic studies and this 60 or 70 pages that we're trying to read and digest, but when you do a traffic study, obviously the person that's doing that study knows who the tenant's going to be.
Yes, we assumed that the most impactful use, which was that particular building with that particular use. In other words, they erred on the most intensive use that you could. Office, warehouse, distribution.
Okay, so if...
In other words, they assume there'll be a lot of trucks because of it being...
But they're assuming
distribution,
they're all
office,
going for
warehouse.
75, correct?
They're not, no, sir, they're not assuming. They're looking at the data. They do this all the time. I think Mr. Sanders will back this up. They look at the data, and based on the data, based on the use, based on comparable uses in other areas for this type of building with this type of use, they look at traffic patterns and they decide where's those traffic patterns going. So to fall back here, the argument was, well, they didn't even consider that intersection. Contrary, no, I disagree. They did consider it, but they decided that because it was only going to be 29% of 5% of the traffic going that way being trucks, there was no use to recommend improvements to that intersection. But all the intersections, in my opinion, were considered. They just decided that's not where this truck traffic is going to go. It's going to go to the 41 and the interstate.
Question.
Yes, sir.
The Waterford section versus that proposed property, what would you estimate the distance would be?
From the Waterford, Mr. McDaniel, is a quarter of a mile. Let's see, I don't have my pointer. The distances are here, but you can't read them. I think it's a quarter of a mile from this corner here to this property line here. Quarter of a mile.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Watkins at this time?
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have leveled out pretty much, or?
Yes, sir. The opponent spoke for 22 minutes and proponent spoke for 18 minutes.
Okay. Is there any new information, or is there anybody on the opponent's side? Come on, step forward, sir.
I'd like to not talk about theory, but talk about actuality. I live right on the corner in that cul-de-sac, adjacent
Yes,
to the
your
property.
name and your address, please, sir.
Yes, my name is David Hayes, and I live at 415 Waterford Drive.
Thank you.
And it's a very wonderful place. It's quiet. It's nice, you know. Daytime, it's noisier, obviously, because we can hear some things up on that road. But I can hear trucks backing up in Old Mill, any tractors that start up and start down, which are very few, I can hear. If I had 500 trucks pulling into that stopping, and then starting back up and pulling out, it would be tremendously noisy. That is high ground. There is nothing to abate the noise coming down there. It actually almost acts as a focusing ground for that noise. So my biggest concern is the noise. That's my first biggest concern. My second biggest concern is the light. Obviously, you have to have floodlights around parking lots and driving areas, et cetera. And that place is going to be like a football stadium, lighting up that whole neighborhood. A quarter mile is not very far. You heard that train come through. That's about 70 dB inside this building. Here it comes now, all right? You want to hear that all day.
Did that pretty well.
But the point is, it's probably not the noise from the building that's going to be the issue. It's the noise from all that heavy truck traffic. You know how loud a tractor is when he's starting up and gearing up to get out of there. And you're going to have that going on probably 24 hours a day if that's an active distribution center. That's my biggest concern.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know you don't want me to speak.
Listen,
Jeff, there's some other people that want to speak first. Let them, and then you'll get a rebuttal chance when they're finished.
Jeff, you'll have plenty of time.
I know.
Hi, I'm Paul Harton from 7 Galway Drive. Mr. Watkins, in his advocacy of his client, had mentioned that there may only be so many trucks a day coming through this property on a certain route. What happens when all the unoccupied industrial use land eventually and hopefully becomes developed and occupied, and then you have that additional traffic too. I just wanted to point that out as part of our argument.
Sir, what was your last name?
Harton, H-A-R-T-N.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Joe Head. I didn't come intending to speak tonight, but I feel a bit compelled to do so.
Your address, please.
24 Alpine Drive. I'm a native of Bartow County in Cartersville. I grew up on Etowah Drive and certainly very aware of the history and the value of our heritage here. I do want to point out one or two things that I think are worth considering as you approach this decision in the next month. You can't see it, but my house is in Conyers Estate. And most people squint their eyes and say, well, where is that? It's behind Waterford, between Old Mill and Waterford on Alpine Drive. It is the Corbett Road dirt drive that connects Old Mill and Pembroke. To make it more specific, I'm 150 feet away from Southern Yarn and Dye. 23 years ago, when I chose to build my house, I went over and spoke to the owner of Southern Yarn and Dye. And we had a good conversation. We were going to be good neighbors, and we have been. And I said, is there going to be anything else that I need to know before I buy this lot? An acre and a tenth. We determined that there was nothing else to know. 7 years later, he expanded by 100%. That was not in our conversation. I can tell you that the backup noise, the external intercom system, the lights, the vagrants, and other issues are real. I'm reluctant to throw my weight either way right now, but you can see where I'm leaning. The other question that I have is that seeing this particular aerial view seems to suggest that all the traffic is going to have an egress and regress on Old Mill around the area of Cody J's. And my thinking is, if the council is going to consider this, I would think that you would be obligated to look at alternatives to ease that traffic. I'm not asking you to approve this. I think I'm more leaning against it. But I can see there should be an egress and regress at the southern portion of this property that goes out to 293. That would be a sensible consideration for this council to consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, may I ask, do you mean at Irwin or do you mean at O'Mill? There's two entrances, two proposed entrances.
Two proposed entrances. I don't think we've understood that, or I didn't. Did you understand two?
There's one.
I think I'm only seeing really one.
No, you got an entrance.
He's thinking about going back out to 293 from the south. He's just thinking about the property. There's two entrances, one off of Irwin and one off of Old Mill to get into this property.
Currently.
Well,
But
proposed. The site plan that's here, it's out both ways, Old
But-
Mill and Irwin.
But the result would be heavy congestion in the same area.
I would argue that's not correct. If you come out of Old Mill, you're gonna go right, there will be traffic going straight, there's already the other traffic going straight.
But
Yeah, if I could have you addressing us, and then Mr. Watkins, you'll have an opportunity to rebut that. I know he's asking questions, but I just want to try to
I just
funnel
want
it through the right place.
clarification. On which entrance?
Well, as I said, I didn't come really prepared to speak, but it appears to me if there's two entrances or exits, it still appears all that traffic is going to wind up within just a few hundred yards of each other at best. So I'm thinking that's still too much as an overload. So there needs to be consideration by the council that there be a southern solution to this as well, or an exclusively southern solution.
Okay? Thank you. I want to give Mr. Watkins an opportunity to address council and mention some of those issues, please.
I'm gonna point out 2 or 3 other things, but in the interest of time.
You have got,
I just wanted to point out.
Mayor,
All right.
there's a gentleman standing up behind him. I didn't know if you wanted him to speak.
go ahead. I know. And again, we're looking, my role here tonight is to get as much new information to council as we possibly can. So I want to make sure that we're plowing new ground when people step forward. I'm happy to hear everybody, but I want to make sure that we're getting new information to council. Yes, sir, your name and your address.
My name is Bob Carroll, and I live in Irwin Downs. And we're hearing a lot here about the Waterford and that kind of thing, but I want to talk about that traffic on Irwin Street, going exactly where you're talking about, sir. You have trapped Irwin Downs with this traffic. And trying to get in and out of there, out of our neighborhood, is extremely difficult when we get all these. And by the way, you say 25 trucks a day. I can count 25 trucks a day now without the rezoning.
Sir, if you please address council and not him.
Okay. Well, and that's another thing that I would want to say about Irwin Downs is there is not any good ways in and out of there. If we want to go to the easy access that we have, we are going up over the bridge onto 41, and it's pretty handy for all of us. And I might also mention that Mr. Watkins' mother lives in Irwin Downs, and she's going to have a problem getting in and out of there as well. And so,
She will tell me about it.
and I will guarantee that she will tell him about it too. It just seems like, he's arguing on the wrong side here for whatever it is. But in particular, Irwin Downs has a problem with the traffic that's on Irwin Street now. And if we add even more to that, it's going to get horrendous to get in and out of there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, I'm gonna allow Mr. Watkins to.
Got one more.
You got 30 seconds. What can I say?
I am.
John Cotter, 58 Thoroughbred Lane, Irwin Downs. We have talked about these 500 trucks coming in every day. We've also got to think them 500 trucks got to leave too.
Okay, thank you. One more, Jeff, and then the floor is yours. You've been very patient, and I appreciate that.
Fred Jenrich, 421 Waterford Drive.
What was that name again?
Genrich. Everybody talks about 70 decibels, and it would be okay if that was the only 70 decibels. But this noise is cumulative. And I don't know if any of you remember back to September 11th when they grounded all the airplanes and how quiet things were. But when you add these additional decibels, it just adds to the roar, it just adds to the noise. And it's not just 70 decibels, it's all adding up together.
Thank you, sir. All right, I'm going to allow Mr. Watkins the final word to this evening, and you address what you need to address, and I believe the balance of time is about 9 minutes in your favor, but feel free to not use all that. But I do want to give you the opportunity to get your point across.
Actually 15.
Okay.
Just two things. One, I failed to point out that the traffic study recommended two things be done. One, to add the lane that there were questions about, I think, during the work session at the South Bridge 41 intersection at the red light, and also additional signage on Old Mill. My clients agreed to do both of those. So if we're successful in the zoning, we'll be happy to do whatever we need to do with the city to make that happen. There's been a lot of talk about the trucks, and I don't quite know where 500 trucks is coming from. If you take the traffic study and you use the numbers based on the percentages of the traffic study, it comes out to be on Irwin, going and coming 133 trucks coming, 133 vehicles going and 133 coming. It's 267 total. So, I mean, I would argue that's a big difference than 500, so I don't know where the 500 is coming from, but I wanted to point that out. Thank you very much.
Yeah, all right, thank you. We will take this up. I want to make it very clear. We will not be taking this up at our first meeting in December. We have our first meeting in December is a morning meeting, and because there are several people that may want to be here, that we just don't take up these types of issues during our morning meeting. The official date of our second meeting in December is December the 17th. Thank you, Sam. And we'll be having another public hearing. And again, we'll ask for new territory to be presented, or new information to be presented, and council will take it up for final consideration at that meeting on the 17th. Yes, we can. So, and want to appreciate everybody coming and being a part of local government tonight. I am going to give we're going to take a 5-minute break so that those that have come just for that one issue to vacate, and anybody that might need a break up here to get one. So we'll re-adjourn in 5 minutes.
Break on it here. Yeah. That's Randy.
Microphones back on. I'll call this meeting. I'll call this meeting back to order. Mr. Grove will join us when he's ready for it. We have Z1507. Mr. Menino, if you'll please get us started with that and try to.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm trying to remember what this case was after. This is a request to rezone approximately 1.03 acres from light industrial to general commercial. The property is located on 49 North Avenue. The applicant, or the property owner who owns the property, has had problems trying to keep a tenant in this particular building because the building itself isn't suited for industrial. I don't believe it was initially built as an industrial type building. With that, Planning Commission did hold a public hearing and did recommend approval of rezoning this piece of property, 1.03 acres, from light industrial to the general commercial zoning category.
Okay, questions for Mr. Menino at this point?
Mr. Menino, what has the use been in this building?
The last tenant that I recall, if you recall, a special use came before you. There was a homeless shelter. I believe a church may have been operating out of the top half, and a homeless shelter came before you because they were trying to put some folks in the basement. There were some issues with fire code and so forth, and they were allowed to stay there for a while. And the fire department tried to work with them to give them some additional time to work out fire code issues, and they were unable to do so, so they ended up moving.
Thank you. I'll open up public hearing Z1507.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Jeff Watkins here on behalf of the applicant. This is a downzoning from light industrial down to commercial. A lot of the potential users that have been looking at this site for my client are looking at something in the general commercial area, and the time it would take to get all the ducks in a row to get this rezoned. You're going to lose the tenant. It's my client's preference and hope that you'll rezone it so we can have the zoning in place, and then they can market this the proper way. I ask you to approve. If you have any questions,
Any questions for Mr. Watkins on this item?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor has 9 minutes and 40 seconds.
Can I go over those?
Anybody wishing to speak for or against Z1507 may step forward and do so at this time. And thank God there are none others. I will close the public hearing. We'll take this up for our final consideration at our meeting on December the 17th. We have some second readings of ordinances. Brevity is the order of the day. Mr. Sanders, I believe you've got us with the erosion and sediment control ordinance change.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the second reading on a one-sentence revision to our erosion control ordinance. This wasn't our idea. It's required by the EPD, and we recommend approval. No changes since the first reading.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Sanders? Questions, comments, or motions?
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Reinhardt. You are next up with the amendment to the budget ordinance for the fiscal year 2014-2015.
Yes, sir. This is just, Mr. Mayor and Council, this is just more or less a house cleaning, housekeeping. This is the second reading of the ordinance. There was a slight change to the first reading. If you'll look at the bottom of the ordinance, the dates were changed. They were I had a misprinted last time. Yeah, that's the only change that this second reading brings before you. A little bit of background. This is the after the fiscal year 2014 is closed. 2014-15 is closed. The general fund and special revenue funds need to be brought back into balance by this amendment. Again, the only one minor change, and I recommend your approval for the attached amended ordinance. Okay. Questions for Mr. Reinhardt on this? Budget neutral, yes.
Again, question, comments, or motions?
Motion to approve.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Amendment to the capacity fee ordinance. Mr. Jones. Mr. Riggs, you're on deck.
Good evening, everyone. As you recall from the first reading, this is some cleanup work during the budget adoption process. A paragraph was omitted, and we are simply going through the process of reinserting that paragraph that was errantly removed. This clears up some of the procedural calculations of capacity fees for nursing homes, hospitals, assisted living facilities where you have multiple unit buildings. Would ask your approval, and there have been no changes since the first reading.
Doesn't change what we do in practice, though?
No,
It's all the
not a
same.
bit.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Any discussion? And if not, a motion's in order.
So moved. Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Riggs.
Mayor, this is just a housekeeping item, and it's the second reading. There's been no changes since the first.
Any discussion or questions? And if not, a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. This next item is going to be handled by Mr. Grove.
Yeah, police chief. Take a little liberty too
Please do.
to say that I've appreciated the time that I've had with you, Tommy. You were the right guy at the right time. You're a great character guy, an integrity guy, and I wish you all the best. With that said, my recommendation is going to be to appoint Frank McCann as chief. The logistics of this, because we did not talk about a closed session, because we didn't interview anybody else, we don't have to put the name out for 14 days. So I'd recommend that you appoint Frank and make that appointment effective on November 25th, which is the chief's last day in office. And then we can do a ceremonial swearing in on the 3rd, so that everybody can have your family in and we can have a little ceremony. But that's the upshot of it. Much we hate to lose the old chief, we got to go on, and I have every confidence that Frank will do a good job.
Absolutely. That is the recommendation by our city manager, and it's up to council to approve that recommendation.
Make a motion to approve.
Second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Mayor, just a comment. It was a great turnout, Chief, for your going away party. And it just, a lot of people showed up and showed how you felt about it in this community. Not only us, but your church and community leaders. And thanks again from all of us. That was a great day.
Don't be a stranger either, you know.
No, don't do that.
I have a lot of retirees that regularly darken my door. I expect you to too.
And don't leave early, because I had my note to say something at the end, but.
I'm so sorry, Mayor.
Come on, Greg.
He's just making that up.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yes, sir, Mayor and Council. This is a resolution for an application for a Land and Water Conservation Fund grant. The grant amount, the maximum is $100,000. It's a 50-50 matching grant, so we'd have to spend $200,000 to get the $100,000. The plan for this money is for the replacement of the picnic shelters at Dillinger Park, which is one of the bond projects. And so this will just make our stretch our money a little bit longer. I recommend approval of this resolution.
Any idea when we know if we got it or not?
It'll be sometime in March, late March.
Thank you. Any discussion? If not, a motion's in order.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Don, for being at the ready.
There you go. Mayor and council, tonight I ask you to bring a resolution before you that Electric Cities of Georgia has proposed to appoint a primary and alternate voting delegate for ECG annual meeting and to elect delegates to elect the board of directors for Electric Cities when the vote comes up. And typically what Cartersville has done in the past is let the director be the primary vote and the assistant director be the alternate vote on these matters. And that's exactly what we're asking the council to approve tonight, to appoint the director as the primary voting delegate for ECG Board of Directors elections and the assistant director as the alternate vote.
Thank you. Any discussion, and if not, a motion?
Motion to approve. I get the second. You get the major.
Second.
You're just doing it all.
It just
Got a
said
motion and a
everything.
second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
We're glad to do it all.
We got it on this end.
Mayor.
Hello, Gary.
This is we got our 2016 membership dues with the Georgia Utility Protection Center. They're $8,311.62, and we're required by state law to be a member.
Okay. Any discussion on this item, and if not, a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Ms. Keeling, you have the next item.
Yes, sir, this is the presentation of the certified election results certified by the Bartow County Board of Electors. Mayor Santini, Jay Stout, Lindsey McDaniel, Linda Benton, Travis Popham, and Pat Broadnax were all unopposed. And Lori Pruitt and Taff Wren, it was a vote of 64 to 147. The countywide vote for the East Splost was 2269 and to 1253. The Splost did win, and I recommend approval of these results.
Okay.
How many did I get?
Well, just a minute, Lindsay, I'll tell you.
41.
41.
There are 41 people that voted for you. Can you believe
Keep in
that?
mind, you got about 70 people you're related to.
You don't have to feed those other 29 for Thanksgiving now.
Chair will entertain a
Motion to
motion.
approve.
Thank you.
Second.
And all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Bob Jones, you got the next three, please.
Yes, sir. First up, we have a proposal from Jacobs Engineering. This would be for design and bid services on the Center Road 24-inch sewer main. The bid price is $24,300 and would recommend that for your approval.
Any discussion on this item? And if not, a motion is in order.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, thank you.
You did what?
Continue on.
Next up is a restock order. You see these a few times a year. This is basically just buying all the parts that we need to keep on hand to fix broken water mains, sewer mains. We took bids. The low bid was from Kendall Municipal for $6,000, or $6,075.65, and would recommend that for your approval.
Okay. Questions, comments, or motions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Last, we have a what's called a smart cover system. This is a system that allows us to monitor flow in sewers underneath the manhole. And it's a proprietary system. It's only available from one vendor. The cost of three of these systems, so you would be able to monitor three locations, $15,477. And this is being purchased to monitor the area around the sinkhole where we had a 24-inch and 15-inch sewer main be impacted by that occurrence, and we'd like to keep an eye on that for the next year or so to make sure we don't have any larger problems than we did with it.
Okay,
Mayor, question.
go right ahead.
Bob, you said these could be moved around to other locations.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the life? Do you have any idea of the life of one of these?
You know, it's like any battery-driven electronics. I mean, honestly, it's probably as long as you want to buy batteries for it. I'm sure at some point it would fail internally, but you're talking about at least 10 years, probably longer.
Any other questions? If not, a motion is in order.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Grove.
Yeah, this is the calendar. The recommendation is to go with New Dimension, the amount of $10,047.91. That's for 10,300 copies.
Okay. Any discussion on this item? And if not, a motion's in order.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Tom Reinhardt.
Honorable Mayor and Council, we have received the annual maintenance invoice from Cogsdale, which is our third-party billing utility software. The invoice is for $66,969.46. Represents an increase of 2.5% over last year's invoice. Talked with a vendor, and they assure me that the cost has been given to all vendors, and the increasing cost of Cogsdale has gone up, and therefore, this is the our share essentially for the cost for improvements and ongoing maintenance. This is a budgeted item, and I recommend your approval of the Cogsdale invoice and the payment of $66,969.46.
Okay. Any questions on this? And if not, a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Porter.
Yes, Mayor and Council, this is a renewal of the United Healthcare supplemental insurance for our retirees. We currently have 68 retirees and 16 dependents covered under this. It's a 15.2% rate increase. They'll be prorated, the retirees will pay their pro rata share of that, and I recommend approval of this.
Okay. Any questions or discussion on this item? If there are none, a motion is in order.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. The monthly financial statements.
Yes, Your Honorable Mayor and Council, we'll be looking at September 2015 and comparing it to September 2014. In the general fund, revenues increased over last year by about $228,000. Expenses decreased by $22,000. This is due mainly to increased personnel expenses. Three areas of revenue I monitor on a monthly basis are the local option sales tax, decrease of $39,000, police fines and forfeitures, decrease of $7,000, and building permits and inspection fees, increase of $46,000. In the water and sewer fund, revenues increased over last year by $260,000, while expenses decreased by $28,000. This is due mainly to decreased capital expenses and decreased personal expenses. In the gas funds, revenues have decreased from last year by $23,000. Expenses decreased by $989,000. This is due to decreased cost of purchased gas and decreased capital expenses. In the electric fund, revenues increased over last year by $706,000. Expenses decreased by $142,000. This is due mainly to decreased operating expenses and decreased cost of electricity. Stormwater fund revenues increased over last year by $11,000. Expenses increased by $16,000 due to increased personnel expenses and decreased operating expenses. In the solid waste fund, revenues increased over last year by $10,000 and expenses decreased by $58,000 due to increased operating expenses coupled with decreased personnel expenses. And finally, in the fiber optics fund, revenues increased over last year by $47,000. Expenses increased by $71,000. This is due to increased personnel, increased operating, increased debt service expenses, and increased capital expenses.
Any questions for Tom on the
Just
financial
point
report?
out to you that gas and general fund are in deficit both for the month and for the year. With property tax coming in the end of the year, general fund will correct, and it'll get cold, and Gary will sell gas, and they'll correct too.
Cold by Sunday, too. Any questions? Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, next meeting will be December 3rd. That is a morning meeting. You're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for that. I do want to take a moment myself and thank Chief Culpepper for his distinguished service to our city and for, as Sam has said, being the right man in the right place and the right time, and job well done. And I'll echo that "don't be a stranger" sentiment, although I know you probably, this is a good way to send you off because you're never going to want to come to a city council meeting after tonight. And I'm not sure that Chief McCann is sure he got himself, what he's got himself into here. But again, thank you, Tommy, on a number of different levels for that. And a happy Thanksgiving to all of our our folks.
Matt, may I ask a question?
Depends who you're going to ask it to.
You?
All right, go ahead.
And then maybe some staff folks. How did we do yesterday with all that rain? How do,
I did fine. I was inside and had a raincoat when I went outside.
well, I was hoping you'd call us somebody who's good knowledgeable.
I'm guessing, Mr. Sanders, did we have any problems with any of the storm events from yesterday?
Oh, yes.
Good answer.
It was an epic storm. They told us about it a week ago, but with all the leaves, I mean, we had our leaf truck out and our burnt sweepers out, but you just can't keep the leaves out of the drain. So, yeah, we had some localized flooding in several places.
Everything's been tended to today, though, right? Okay. Absolutely.
All they did was try to put the places we found out about.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Moonlight Hike,
It's pretty tough.
November the 25th.
Wednesday, November the 25th, I've got a.
You ate them
Leading the group, so, hopefully I'll make the next one, but I won't make this one. But anyway, it is, Wednesday the 25th, day before, Thanksgiving.
Departing at what time?
Sundown,
5:15.
4:30.
Okay.
Around there? That's a good time.
Very good.
Probably 4:30.
All right, thank you. Any other business that needs to come before council?
Wow.
Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Not get a rumble.